Hello everyone, welcome back to Mortons on the Move. If you've been following us for any time, you've probably noticed that we haven't actually been on the move very much in our truck camper. And there's good reason for that. Over a year ago, our truck suffered a catastrophic engine failure. The repair has been long and tedious, and just figuring out what's been wrong with it has been challenging. But today, we're finally going to replace the last major problem with it, which is a bent piston crankshaft connecting rod. Now, if you know anything about engines, you'll know that that is a serious repair. It's basically a full engine rebuild. Today, I'm going to tell you the story about what happened, and we're going to dive into this engine and get this truck back on the road. So stay tuned. So welcome back, everybody. Today I am on my way right now to my mechanic to work on this truck. But before I get there, I want to tell you the story about what actually happened with our truck. Luckily, we were basically back home, and we used the truck for work purposes and towing our boat to the lake. We had actually towed the boat to the lake, and we had parked it in a temporary garage that we have, and it was on a pretty steep hill with the nose down. And the truck had run just fine, and I went to start the truck up the next day, and the truck turned over just fine. It fired maybe one, maybe two cylinders, and then it seized. The engine just locked up, and the whole truck lurched terribly and came to a stop. We were really confused as to what happened, and we basically let it just sit there for a little bit. And then we thought, okay, is the engine seized? What happened with it? So we tried to bar the engine over slowly, and we basically were able to get the engine to turn over, and then we were able to restart the engine, and the truck actually fired up, and it ran, but it ran belching white smoke. Now, white smoke, smoke color can mean a lot in an engine, and white smoke, particularly in a diesel, typically is unburned diesel fuel. And that is from the injectors injecting the fuel into the cylinder, but then it getting pushed back out through the exhaust stroke in vapor form. So we knew we had a problem, but I thought the problem initially was a leaking injector, and I had hypothesized that the engine did something called a hydrolock. What a hydrolock is in an engine is when you either get some sort of fluid in the engine's piston that is incompressible. Now, this could be coolant if you have a serious head gasket leak, or in my case, what I thought the problem was fuel. You can actually drip so much fuel into the cylinder that when you start it, the piston comes up and tries to compress the vapor that it would normally compress, but it can't do it. So it slams into this incompressible fluid and stops. Now, sometimes this might not damage the engine, but a lot of times hydrolocks do cause a lot of damage. So the first thing I did was figure out which piston was the problem, and I found out it was cylinder 6 through trial and error and testing a lot of different things. And I basically turned off the fuel flow to that cylinder, and I got rid of the smoke. So cylinder 6 injector was leaking terribly. What we ended up doing, or I ended up doing, is I got a new injector and I replaced the injector in the truck myself. Turned it back on, and it ran exactly the same, belching white smoke. Now the repair is beyond my capabilities. So I found a mechanic that was willing to take on this truck. A lot of mechanics aren't willing to take on a modified engine. This engine already was seriously modified. So I found a mechanic who was willing to do that, and we dove into the truck, and he found actually quite a few problems with the original build of the engine that I didn't do. First of all, the injectors were wrong for the truck. This is a 5500 cabin chassis truck, which is different than your traditional pickup truck, even with the same engine in it. And the injectors are different. However, they had put injectors from a standard Ram Cummins 6.7 diesel engine in the truck. And we think that's might be partially what caused this injector failure. The injector most likely stuck open, dumped so much fuel into the cylinder that the engine hydrolocked. Upon further investigation, the mechanic found that we had actually not only a failed injector and the wrong injectors, but we had actually cracked the head of the engine. This is the whole top of the engine that holds all the compression and the explosions in place, right? The engine head was cracked. So we bought a whole new head, all new valves, all new rockers, all new everything, and we installed it on the truck. Fired up the truck, kind of got it to work because we had compression, we had good injectors, but it still wasn't running right. And the problem there was a timing issue. The truck wasn't timing quite right. So further tear down, and we determined that we actually have a bent connecting rod. We've checked all of our push rods, we've checked our crank, we've checked everything else in the engine, and we found that we actually bent one of the connecting rods on the cylinder that hydrolocked. When it slammed into place, that rod that connects the piston and the crankshaft actually bent a little bit. Not catastrophically, well, I guess it's catastrophic. Any bent is catastrophic, but not enough so to stop the engine from running, but enough so that it throws off the timing of the engine. Long story, lots going on, and a long time in between then and now. But today, we're finally gonna tear this engine all the way down and replace that connecting rod. I'm really looking forward to getting this truck back on the road. We've made some other modifications to the engine that I'll tell you about through this process. Additional reliability upgrades since we've torn the engine down this far, and we're hopefully going to make this engine run really well for a very long time. I can't wait to have this truck back on the road. Well, here she is. As you can see, oh, there's no driveline and there's no engine. Wow, got a lot of work to do. All right, here she is. Oh, yes. Out of the truck, head's still on. This is the engine on its side. So this is the bottom, missing the oil pan. So here we got our oil pickup, all right? And this is the actual crank inside there. Cylinder 1, cylinder 6. This right here, in there, that's our problem. That is bent. The other thing we were worried about was tappets, or what they call lifters, which are further up in here. We thought that maybe we could have an issue with the cam, but it turned out that wasn't our problem. Our problem is timing with cylinder 6. However, we are going to be replacing the cam in this engine. The cam that they put in when they had built this engine was really designed for a higher RPM application to produce the power, which in a big tire towing application isn't really ideal. The cam normally sits in here and goes down, and that's what lifts the rods up to the head, and our valves, which are here. There's normally rockers, they're all off. But we are replacing the cam with a slight, it's still a performance cam, but it's less, I guess, aggressive in what was originally in here. It's going to give us a little more clearance, and I think it's going to be a lot better for what we particularly want to do with this engine. So here we've got a parts wash station. One of the things about working on an engine is it's really critical that we get all the parts extremely clean. For example, these are our rockers that actually rock back and forth, and the trunnions that they actually rock on. You can see how easily that moves in there. All of these parts, when you crack an engine open, have the potential to get contaminants in them. So before we put anything back together, we need to very carefully disassemble every single one of these parts, and we need to clean them all. Make sure we don't have any contaminants in it. So right now I'm washing down a bunch of different parts. Here's more parts I've got to work with, and then in here, I've got all these clean, dried parts that are ready to be reinstalled in the engine. Now, to do the actual build on the engine, we've got to, or to get the piston out, we have to actually remove this top piece, which is called the head. And this is all brand new in this engine. All this has been rebuilt already because we cracked this originally. This is gonna come back off one more time, and the piston's actually gonna come out the top. So that's what we're working on now. We flipped it, as you can see, and we're hopefully gonna get that taken off at least by tonight. This is gonna be a multi-day project, if you haven't been able to tell already. All right, we're back. It's another day. I had to go get some sleep. However, Brent here kept at it late into the night. Pretty much all night, didn't you? And he was able to actually get the piston rod pulled. We are able to clearly see the bend in this, and he's got the new one back in. So I guess we could say the truck is repaired. The main problem is repaired. We just have to put it all back together now, and that in itself is a lot of work. So back to cleaning. So the second day in the shop was more parts washing, but over the night of day one, my mechanic had been able to actually pull the piston out and pull out that bent connecting rod. He got the connecting rod reinstalled, so basically the repair had already been done, but the engine at this point is just completely disassembled. So more parts washing, but also the reassembly started to begin. Now, our reassembly didn't go exactly as it had come apart because we did have some parts we were still waiting on orders. We were waiting for an oil cooler, and we had a little bit of a delay on our camshaft. We tried very hard to remove the timing gear off of the camshaft without a press, but it just wasn't going well. We were heating it. We tried ice and hammering, and we just couldn't get it off. So we needed to delay a day on getting the camshaft reinstalled, and that slowed us up. But we were able to start putting the lower unit parts. We were able to put in the tappets, and the engine's completely on its side at this point. We were also able to install the clutch on the back of the engine. Here we go. New clutch. Go with the new engine. See, the engine's still on its side, and the reason for that is that we were a little bit defeated by the replacement of the cam today. We're gonna need a press to get it off, get the gear off, so we can put the new cam in. But no reason we can't do this on its side. All right, end of day two, and here's where we're at with the engine. The bent rods, of course, is replaced. We're still on our side because we are putting a different cam in this engine, and we fought with the existing cam trying to get the timing gear off the front, and 3 hours went by and we did not succeed. So tomorrow we got to get that on a press to take that out and get it in here. We've decided to build it on the shop floor. We're gonna do engine, transmission, all right here, and then drop it into the truck because we're actually gonna lift the cab off the truck to do that. So here's our progress. Also over here, we've got the front all cleaned up. Got that new shiny water pump on there from, what's it called? Bulletproof Diesel. And still waiting on the oil pan, but we got a lot of other stuff cleaned up here. I'm really happy with the progress. Tomorrow, I think we're gonna be a lot further along, but I'm whooped. I'm gonna go get some sleep. Another day. Welcome back to the shop. Not my shop, my mechanic's shop, but we've got that truck in here today. That is a good sign. So our engine still on its side. The big thing was getting that cam in there, and the cam is in it now, so we can get the engine upright. We can start on the head, and then we can start on the truck itself. What's gonna happen here is we're actually gonna lift the cab of the truck off. We're gonna pull the frame out, and then we're gonna put the entire engine transmission build in the frame separated from the cab. Now we're gonna put it all back together, drop the cab back down. That's the plan, at least. So back to it. I gotta work on draining the transmission fluid, and then we're gonna get that assembled onto our engine driveline one-piece component. All right, we're getting closer to final assembly now. Trans is flushed, filled. Transfer case, flushed, filled. I'm gonna move the trans over to where Brent's working on getting the head ready to get on there. We're gonna put it all together in one piece. Never. Springs, bearing, this moves, compresses it, releases the clutch. All greased up and ready to go. The back, right? Yep. Alright, so is that the same height as the narrow one? All right, end of day 3. It's a lot of work putting one of these things back together. And I didn't even do the work taking it apart, so. But look where we're at. Engine, transmission, transfer case. We are very close. Head gasket, head. Once we're together, we're gonna be rocking. However, it is, I don't even know what time it is. 1, 2 in the morning? 1:45 in the morning. So I'm gonna sign off for the night, but let's hope we can have this thing running tomorrow. Back to the shop, hopefully for the final day. The drivetrain is mostly assembled. I'm on my way to pick up oil and coolant, and hopefully we're gonna have that truck running by the end of the day. And I am super excited. It's been over a year since I've been behind the wheel of that truck. So it's gonna feel really good to get it back on the road. Well, here's where we're at today. Look at that, almost one complete powertrain unit. That's pretty cool. There's the truck. I think she's just about ready. Day 4 was an exciting day because it was actually putting the engine back in the truck. However, the truck had to be disassembled further to be able to put it back in. What we did was we actually lifted the cab off of the chassis. Now, my mechanic had already pulled the cab apart, and it was pretty much ready to be lifted. So we basically put the truck in the bay and got the lift underneath the cab, and then lifted the cab up off the chassis of the truck. Then we were able to actually pull the chassis of the truck outside so that we would have room to pick up the entire drivetrain and place it into the chassis. So while it might seem like a lot of work to lift the cab off of one of these trucks to do what we're doing, it actually makes it a lot easier. Now, a lot of times you're not removing the entire driveline. Because ours is a manual, it makes it a little more conducive to actually build it the way we did in one big system, one big piece, and put it in here. But removing the cab on these trucks is actually, that's how they're intended to operate. Most of them have just plugs that you could just unplug, and the cab is intended to be removed to allow access to the frame and the engine. The engine and drivetrains on these are so big in these trucks that it's really the best way to do it. Now, I've never done this before, but this is pretty much how my mechanic does all of his trucks, and watching him do it, it really is pretty incredible. So we're here, we're about to drop it into the truck. We just got to figure out how to get it out here because this truck is a little bit taller, bigger than a traditional one. We picked up the drivetrain using his skid steer and slowly moved it over and maneuvered it into place. I was able to kind of prevent it from swinging too much and align it while he dropped it down into place. And there are actually only 4 points where the engine and transmission make contact in this truck. 2 big mounting points up front and 2 back on the transmission. So just getting it aligned, it basically dropped into place, and it was really quite easy to get it back together. After we had the drivetrain installed in the chassis, we rolled it back into the shop and lowered the cab back down into place. I'm really oversimplifying this process a bit. There are a lot of things that have to get reconnected. The drive axles need to get reconnected, the steering, the braking system, and the electrical between the cab and the chassis all have to get reassembled. Luckily, those things actually are relatively easy. This particular truck just has some really big plugs, and we're able to disconnect the electrical, connect it back up, reconnect the steering, reconnect the brakes, and get it ready to go.
Oh, well, look at that. The engine's back in the truck. Yeah.
The whole drivetrain is back in the truck.
The whole drivetrain is in the truck.
Within an hour, it went from a frame, a cab in the air, and shit on the ground to 2 drive shafts, a steering link, and some cooling.
We have the engine back in, fully rebuilt. Oh my gosh. All right, end of day 4. There's an engine back in the truck, and it's been rebuilt, which is awesome. We have run into a handful of extremely frustrating little things that have really been holding us up, but I think we've got most of those resolved-ish. I think we'll have her running tomorrow. All right, build day 5, and we are back together. The engine is ready for oil and coolant. We're just putting the last pieces together to actually be able to drive her. A couple more things and we'll be able to start her up.
Now on day 5, basically the system was back together, but there are just so many things to wring out towards the end. We had a few electrical issues. One of our wires had pulled out of the wiring harness for the actual computer module in the engine. We had to trace down every single wire and figure out basically where that went back into the harness. We had some other weird electrical things that we had to chase down. And then we had to actually put fluids into the engine and test everything and make sure we didn't have any leaks, which we did have a few leaks. And that's actually very common when you're doing a full rebuild like this. And it's not usually a big deal. We just had a few coolant leaks that we were able to readjust the hoses and get everything straightened back out. But on day 5, we did start up the truck and it ran great. We had to go through and figure out a few electrical things with the engine, but it was running really well. And I took it for its first test drive, and this test drive was basically around the block. I was so thrilled that it was running well. However, when we first test drove it, it was smoking really good still, but it wasn't a white smoke. It was kind of a blue smoke. And my mechanic was basically saying that's completely normal after a rebuild. We got a lot of oil down through the exhaust system, all the components, the cylinders, everything's got like greases and oils in it that need to burn off. So it was smoking real good, but besides that, it was running really nicely. At the end of that day, we also reinstalled the bumper on the truck. This bumper is very heavy, probably about 400 pounds, and we used the lift to actually reinstall that. But then we had some electrical issues with that because that's also my headlights. So we had to go through the wiring on that, and I didn't take the truck home on day 5.
All right, here we are, 6 days. Put her all, well, he took her all apart. We put her all back together. It's running great, I'm thrilled. However, can't quite take it home tonight because we couldn't wring out the wiring for the bumper, which is our primary driving lights down here. They're a little bit off. So we'll leave it here. He's gonna wrap up some of the electrical tomorrow, but she's ready to hit the road. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. She's not 100% ready. We got to put a couple 100 miles on it and then bring it back and re-torque the head. It actually requires taking quite a bit off. The reason for that is because we're running very special studs, and really anytime you crush a head gasket, after there's some heat cycles, the gasket material can basically get further crushed and you don't form a proper seal. So to have a nice good seal and longevity, you have to go back in and retorque the heads after she's been heated a bit. But gosh, I'm happy. She drove great. We're gonna get her back on the road finally.
Day 6 was final reassembly of some of the electrical, making sure all the headlights were working. We made sure everything was basically working as it should. And then I took the truck for a nice long drive. So on day 6, I took it for a long drive. I came back to the mechanic. We ran through it with the computer, made sure everything was looking good from the engine perspective. And then I took it home, and we were pushing to actually take this truck on a trip basically the next day. So I had to get up in the middle of the night and heat the truck up again and then let it cool down. We needed a couple heat cool cycles before we retorqued the engine. So day 6 was basically running the truck and testing it out. But day 7 Back to my mechanic, and we took the head all apart again so that we could get at the studs, and then we re-torqued all the studs of the head. At this time, we also charged up the AC system, the air conditioning, and after all of that, she was basically ready to hit the road. This might sound kind of crazy, but right after the rebuild, we took her home, we loaded the truck camper onto it that hadn't moved in over a year, we packed it up, and we prepared to hit the road the very next day for the shakedown trip, if you will. So there we go. We've got our rebuilt truck. It's been about 700 miles now, and things have been going really smoothly. In the next video, we're gonna bring you along on this shakedown adventure. Cross our fingers that we don't have any problems, but we're really excited to be back on the road with this truck. As always, I hope that you head over to mortonsonthemove.com and subscribe over there as well. We always share updates as to our adventures and what's going on via email. I hope that you're also subscribe and hit that like button here on YouTube. That always helps us out. Otherwise, be safe, everybody. Hope your engine doesn't blow up, and we'll see you down the road.